Jessica had always felt that the ocean spoke to her in ways the world on land never could. Growing up near the rugged coasts of Oregon, she spent her childhood chasing waves, collecting seashells, and sketching dolphins leaping across the horizon. Her friends remembered her as the girl who would rather spend a rainy afternoon on a windswept beach than inside with warm cocoa. There was a pull, a magnetic force that seemed to tether her to the sea as if she belonged to it more than to the world of people. On her 29th birthday, Jessica made a promise to herself: she would finally swim with dolphins, the dream that had colored her heart since she was a little girl. She saved for months, took extra shifts at the cafe she worked in, and booked a trip to a marine park along the Florida coast. It wasn't the wild ocean, but it was close enough. For her, it was the chance to touch what had always been just out of reach. Her father, Michael, had hesitated when she told him. "Jess, dolphins are beautiful, but they're not pets. They're wild animals, even in captivity. Just be careful." She had smiled, brushing off the concern. "Dad, don't worry. It's going to be magical. It's my dream. You taught me to chase dreams, remember?" And so she went, carrying not only her excitement but also the quiet blessing of her father, who stood on the shorelines of his own memories, remembering when his daughter was just a little girl running barefoot on the wet sand the morning of the swim. The sky stretched wide and blue, with only a few streaks of cloud drifting lazily overhead. Jessica slipped into the wetsuit, feeling the snug embrace of neoprene against her skin, and stepped onto the platform where trainers guided the animals. Dozens of tourists watched from the stands, cameras poised, while soft music played through the speakers. Jessica lowered herself into the water, her heart thudding with both nerves and joy. Around her, the dolphins moved gracefully, their slick gray bodies gliding like shadows beneath the surface. One trainer called out encouragement while another tossed fish as rewards. Jessica reached out and touched the back of a dolphin as it swam past, feeling the smooth, almost rubbery texture under her palm. She laughed, a sound full of awe and disbelief. "I can't believe this is real," she called out, but within moments, reality shifted. One dolphin, larger, stronger, unpredictable, broke away from the others. Its behavior was sharp, erratic, unsettling. Trainers blew their whistles, tried to redirect its energy, but something had shifted in the water. The dolphin lunged, striking Jessica with sudden force. The crowd gasped. A child cried out. Trainers rushed forward, but the water erupted into chaos. Jessica's scream was muffled by the splash, and within seconds the dream she had chased all her life dissolved into terror. Her body was pulled under, then surfaced again. Panic swept across the platform. The trainers dove in, fighting against the animal's sudden aggression, struggling to pull Jessica back to safety. By the time they wrestled her free, the damage was done. Blood tinged the water with red, a terrible stain against the bright blue pool. Jessica was unconscious as they dragged her out, her father watching from the bleachers in a state of shock so deep it felt like his soul had been ripped from him. She never woke again. Perfect, let's continue Jessica's heartbreaking story. I'll keep the suspense and emotion heavy, written in long flowing paragraphs, building toward her burial and the astonishing Orca farewell. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and heartbreak. Jessica's body lay still on the bed, machines beeping steadily as if mocking the silence in the room. Her father, Michael, sat beside her, his hands gripping hers as though his warmth might pull her back. But the doctor's words had already stripped away hope. She suffered catastrophic internal injuries, the physician explained quietly, his voice subdued, as if louder tones might shatter the fragile space between grief and acceptance. We tried everything, but she never regained consciousness. Michael didn't respond. He couldn't. He just stared at his daughter, remembering the first time he had held her in his arms, her tiny fingers gripping his thumb as if she were afraid he would ever let go. And now, here he was, forced to let go in the cruelest way imaginable. Outside the hospital, news outlets had already caught wind of the tragedy. Headlines spread across Florida and beyond: dolphin attack turns deadly, young woman loses life in marine park accident. But to Michael, she wasn't a headline. She was Jessica, his little girl, his reason for still walking this earth. The funeral was planned with care. Jessica had once told her father, almost in passing, "If I ever leave this world, I want to go back to the ocean. That's where I belong." At the time, he had laughed and teased her for being overly dramatic. Now, those words burned like prophecy. The day of the burial came cloaked in gray skies and a soft drizzle that seemed to weep with the family. A chartered vessel carried Jessica's coffin, a modest casket adorned with white lilies and sea blue ribbons, far into the Atlantic. Friends, relatives, and a small circle of mourners gathered on deck, their faces drawn in sorrow, their eyes red from sleepless nights and endless tears. Michael stood at the bow, clutching the folded note his daughter had once written, tucked inside a journal he had found after her death. The note read simply, "The ocean is both my sanctuary and my teacher. If my life ends there, let me rest in its arms." When the priest began to speak, his voice cracked against the sound of waves. "We return Jessica to the sea, where her heart always lived, and where her spirit will forever dance with the tides." Michael stepped forward, laying a hand on the coffin. His voice trembled. "You chased the sea your whole life, Jess, and now the sea will carry you. But my God, I wish it hadn't been so soon." As the ropes lowered her into the water, sobs rippled across the deck. Roses were scattered, their petals breaking apart as they floated across the gray surface. The ocean swallowed her gently, the coffin disappearing into the depths with an eerie serenity. Just as silence began to settle over the mourners, a sound cut through the air, a deep, resonant blow of air and water. Heads turned sharply toward the horizon. There, not far from the boat, the massive black dorsal fin of an orca rose like a blade through the surface. Gasps erupted among the mourners. The orca surfaced again, closer this time, its slick body shimmering under the gray sky. It exhaled a spray of mist that drifted into the wind, almost like a sigh. Then, to the astonishment of everyone on deck, it circled the boat slowly, deliberately, as though acknowledging the grief that hung in the air. Michael gripped the railing, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "She loved you," he whispered under his breath, though no one could hear him. "She loved all of you, and now you've come to say goodbye." The orca lingered near the spot where the coffin had disappeared, rising once more in a slow, graceful breach. The sight was breathtaking, surreal, almost otherworldly. Even the most skeptical among the mourners felt something shift deep in their chest, as if the ocean itself had sent its guardian to honor Jessica's passing. Children on deck fell silent, their usual restlessness replaced by wide-eyed awe. Adults wiped tears from their cheeks, unable to explain the moment but certain they would never forget it. The orca did not leave. For nearly half an hour, it swam in a wide circle around the boat, surfacing and diving as if keeping watch. The mourners whispered among themselves, their grief momentarily broken by awe. Some believed it was pure coincidence, a random encounter at sea. But to those who stood in silence, it felt like more, like a messenger of the ocean had arrived to guide Jessica into her eternal home. Michael's eyes never left the animal. He leaned heavily against the railing, his hand clutching the chain around his neck where Jessica's childhood locket hung. The sight of the orca stirred something deep within him, something that words could never capture. "She always said the ocean would recognize her," he murmured to his sister, who stood trembling beside him. "Do you see this? Do you see what's happening?" His sister nodded, unable to speak, her tears falling silently into the sea. At one point, the orca surfaced so close that its massive eye seemed to meet Michael's. In that instant, an unspoken connection passed between them, grief, recognition, and perhaps even comfort. The creature released a soft vocalization, a haunting sound that echoed over the waves like a hymn. Many on the deck later swore it sounded like mourning. The priest, who moments earlier had delivered words of faith, found himself at a loss. He crossed himself slowly, whispering, "God works in ways beyond us, maybe this is one of them." The orca eventually lifted its body halfway from the water in a final breach, its great black and white form glistening against the stormlit sky, before disappearing beneath the waves. The sea grew still again, but no one on that vessel would ever forget what they had witnessed. That night, back on shore, Michael sat alone in his daughter's room, surrounded by the remnants of her life, photographs pinned to the walls, sketches of dolphins tucked into notebooks, and the faint scent of her favorite lavender candle still lingering in the air. The house was unbearably silent. He replayed the moment in his mind. The orca's eye, the sound of its call, the slow circle it swam around the boat. It didn't feel random. It felt intentional. As if the ocean itself had chosen to reassure him that his daughter was not lost, only transformed.